The four things that are most important to qualifying for a mortgage, and if we can vet these as a realtor, in a loose conversation, is income. Number two is, debt is obviously key, and having minimal debt will be helpful in getting a mortgage approved at a higher amount. Keeping your credit clean is very important.
And I'm Jenny Woon.
And you're listening to In the House podcast. We have a guest and friend on our podcast today, Mr. ZAHEED Valli-HASHam. Did I pronounce it right? I know I've known you for a long time.
Great job.
I always get it wrong. Okay.
It's always a challenge, but you did a great job.
Awesome. And ZAHEED is with Citywide Mortgage. So we're not going to forget about our spirit animal question today. But before we get into that, I'm just going to say you have over 400 five-star Google reviews from clients that you have worked with, and you've helped them obtain mortgage financing. That's spectacular. And you've been licensed for, it's over 10 years now, right?
Yeah, I actually just in February celebrated my my 10-year anniversary. So 10 years.
Congratulations.
And a couple months.
Congratulations. We know how it is as a grind in this business.
Yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And you were also in 2020 Broker of the Year by Canadian Mortgage Awards.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And in addition to this, I think one of the reasons why you're so successful in helping your clients is that you have access to over 50 reputable lenders. That's spectacular. Mm-hmm. So that's really value driven. And we're going to we're going to ask you a lot of questions today, but the first question is an icebreaker question.
We're going to start off with, what is your spirit animal?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've had this similarly asked before, and I was before, I'd say tempted to say like a lion or a tiger, because just the hunter and just going to go after it kind of thing. But I've, over the years of the 10 years, I've kind of been more when you first start out, you're always looking for business and you're really going out there and getting it. But I've kind of found that when you start out, you have to work really hard, but as you grow in your business, you kind of have to shift to working smarter over harder. So I'm still trying to find that one. Maybe you can both help me identify what it would be for someone who's maybe a little bit thinking more smarter about, like more tactical maybe about their business or about their lives, I guess. So what would we'd have to come up with that, because I used to go with that, but I want to come up with something different. So I'm going to kind of turn it around on you a little bit and see if you can help me come up with one.
A strategic tactical animal?
A wolf? Would it be a wolf?
Could be, but they tend to be in packs. I mean, you have an amazing mortgage team, but would you consider yourself part of a pack or more individual?
How about the leader of the wolf pack, maybe?
There you go. And we've got it. Okay, well, I will say this, just because you're one of our mortgage brokers that we turn to in order to get results for clients. You are one of the only people that can get a pre-approval done and turned around in less than 24 hours time, even in transitioning markets, which is crazy. And you are highly responsive to clients that we've sent to you, and also to us as the realtor referral partner. So in saying that, like, how do you always, your team is pretty massive. How are you able to be responsive to clients in this way and get everything done that you need to get done?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, one of the things I pride myself in is being responsive. Obviously, we're in a time where, instant gratification, right? And especially in our markets, things move so quick, and you really need to be responsive to be successful in our respective businesses, right? I've heard stories of people, sending an email, sending a text, or making a call and not hearing back for days and wondering like what's going on. So I've really focused on responsiveness and being reliable, but it does take a team like you touched on. So I do have an amazing underwriter and assistant who behind the scenes, while I'm having a conversation with the client or doing this podcast, will be working on the files that we have. So again, full-time working for me. So they're dedicated to kind of handling my files, and while I'm doing this, they're working on pre-approvals, and and we have a meeting in the morning to kind of prioritize our day, and if there are certain files that need to be prioritized, we make sure that those get done earlier in the day, and then we kind of go through that process.
So give us a bit of a background about yourself. So you started 10 years ago. Were you like solo before? Obviously, you don't hire an assistant and an underwriter right away. So tell us gradually how that happened in your business.
Yeah, I'd love to share. So, I started 10 years ago, and I was the lone wolf. I guess we'll kind of play on that theme here. I was the lone wolf through the initial journey, and then obviously my business grew year over year. I've 10 years in, I've increased my volume and number of files per year every year for 10 years. So, at some point, I specifically or vividly remember this sitting in my office. I'm actually work from home a little bit now, but I was in my office, and it was like a Wednesday night at like 8 p.m. And if I had hair, I would have been pulling it out, because I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm here. I have like all these emails to get back to, all these clients that email, and I'm at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night at the office, replying emails and stressing out that, oh my gosh, I didn't get back to this person today. And again, with being responsive, you really want to try and get to those emails as soon as possible to show your value, right? And so I just had this moment where I'm like, oh, like I need help. Like, and one of the toughest parts of being, an entrepreneur or someone who's kind of got their own business or, a commission-based business is delegating. And, that how you do your business, how you communicate, how you write an email, how you respond to message, but to give that responsibility to someone else is one of the biggest fears that a lot of entrepreneurs have, is delegating and relying on someone else to see how they do and hope that they keep that level of standard for you. So that was my kind of issue at the time, was just not being able to delegate. And I remember I was about to go on vacation, and I'm like, how do I take a month off? I'm going to Europe, and how do I take a month off and still maintain my business? So I actually went through that trip, and when I came back, the first thing I did was got an assistant, because I just realized that if I want to grow, I'm going to need help. I can't do it all myself. To a certain level of volume you can, but then at a certain point you're like, okay, there's no work-life balance. It's work. And I could have worked 25 hours a day if it were humanly possible at that time, but it was just kind of that aha moment that, okay, to scale, need help. And that's when it triggered. I went on that trip, took some time away and came back, and hired an assistant and underwriter, and here we are today.
Yeah. How many years in the business were you when you hired the assistant?
So that was in 2017, so 5 years. Yeah, so 5 years, and I was doing it all at a very high level. Like, my volume had increased those 5 years, and in that, I'd say it took me about 3 years to really get going in this business. In the first 2 years, you're kind of finding your way. You're new in the first year, you're learning and trying to absorb. You're that sponge, right? You're just taking out, some really great mentors in my profession that kind of helped me, and then you kind of like start to venture out on your own. You start connecting with people, and you grow. And then, year two, you kind of we have a lot of different product offerings, obviously. So, to learn the different nuances from lender to lender, that's what takes time and experience and seeing a number of files. So by year three, I was kind of like, the momentum was growing in year three. And then 4 or 5, I probably should have been hiring someone, I'd say in my third or fourth year. But again, that whole delegating, right? I had trouble with that. And but then when I did do it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I do this before? This is like the best thing I could have done, right? Yeah.
So can you tell us I know your emails were compiling up, and you said you're the kind of the front and the face of working and interacting with your clients. Tell us exactly what you're delegating, because agents have a hard time of giving up that control and the fear of delegating. So what exact responsibilities does your assistant have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in our side, I still like to be the face and the voice, because when people and find me online through my Google reviews, whatever, they're expecting that I'm going to be the one who picks up the phone. If they're looking for Zaheed, they'd hope that they get to talk to Zaheed, right? So I still like to be the face and the voice, but what I have my assistant and underwriter do is basically, when we send an application to a client, there are a number of documents that we need to see. We need to see their income, we need to see their down payment. There's a process that we go through. So, we would assistant would gather those documents, and then the underwriter is basically there to deal with the lender side of things. So the underwriter would package the file and deal with the underwriter from the lender side, and they would kind of go back and forth to get the file approved. So I'm basically the face and the voice, but anything like document ordering, appraisals, all that stuff, that all gets taken care of.
So, and then fast forward to today, your current team, how many people, what are their roles, and yeah, what kind of volume, I guess, are you also anticipating this year?
Yeah, for sure. So Citywide Mortgage Service is similar to real estate. So Citywide is a franchise. So, we have, you have your Remaxes, you have your Oakwinds, and you have, all those. So we're actually independent, but Citywide is actually a franchise. So there's about, I think we're just north of 30 brokers at Citywide right now. So I'm one of the brokers at Citywide. So everyone's independent, similar to realtors. So, but then I've got my own personal underwriter and assistant, so they're full time, that salary paid by me, and they're the ones who kind of help just with my files only. And then other brokers, some of the top producers in the office will have their own assistants or underwriters as well.
So does that mean that if you don't have an underwriter, you are using Citywide's mortgage underwriter?
So yeah, great question. So different offices or different franchises kind of have different setups. So some franchises choose to have a team underwriter, if you will. So they have an underwriter or a couple underwriters that help every broker in the office. Our particular model is that every agent is on their own, but then there is support available through there are a couple underwriters that help multiple brokers in the office. But personally, I have my own underwriter that would just handle my files alone.
Okay. And so are there any specific systems or tools that are offered from the franchise or even from like third parties? Because we have so many CRMs. It's unbelievable that there's not one CRM that does everything. So is there a specific system or tool that you guys have as mortgage brokers that you're, putting, documenting, document management, or, streamlining the process between you, the mortgage broker, the underwriter, and also to the brokerage?
Great question.
Yeah, I love this question. And, in our line, and maybe in your line too, someone's maybe coined this phrase, is the best CRM is the one that you're going to use. So there are so many CRMs out there, and they do so many things. If one CRM does, let's just say even 100 things, you may only use it for 10. Like, find me someone who uses 100% of what a CRM offers. So I'm an Excel nerd, I'll put it out there. So for me, I've come up with my own systems and processes to, again, be able to be that quick and that responsive. So we've got great systems and processes that I've implemented. We use a tool mainly called Zapier. I don't know if you're familiar.
I don't.
It automates everything.
It automates so much. So it's like almost hiring another assistant. Zapier is your assistant. If you set it up correctly, there's so much that it can automate. And I really took the time to implement that into my business to save a lot of time in the systems and the processes that we have. So, like reminders, like so many things that it can do for you. So yes, we do have CRM systems in the mortgage side of the world. There are a couple out there that are, well known in our industry, but I personally don't use one because when I first started out, and this is advice I give to every new broker, and there's, some in our office that have just recently joined in the last year. And the one piece of advice I give them is set up your CRM. If you have 0 clients, it is the perfect time to set up. Actually, the best time is when you have 1 client. Your first client, set it up and model everything around them, because you can perfect a system around one person, and then you just scale and you grow. So when you get 2, 5, 10, 50, 20, 100, you grow. You have the system, you know what you want to do and how you want to do it, and perfect it with 1 client. And I was late to that. So, I didn't really go back and really fine tune the CRM process until like 3 or 4 years. So I remember sitting at home for a whole weekend, not going out, and I'm like, hey, I just have to do this. You do it one time and it's taken care of forever. And I remember like literally from like on a Friday night, I didn't leave till Monday morning, and I just sat at home and I'm like, okay, this just has to be done. And I caught up for the 3 years that I had missed, and now I'm all caught up, and I've got Zapier tied in, and it's just the systems and processes that I've created for myself, and they all revolve simply around an Excel spreadsheet, to be honest with you.
I might want to see this spreadsheet.
Yeah, I used Monday.com, but
I've never
I would
used
love
that.
to. Yeah, I'm going to explore Zapier.
Okay, so before we get into more mortgage, like the topic of today is mortgages, rates, what's going to happen, et cetera, and we want to hear more about your client process as well, how you walk people through the qualification. What is your volume goal for this year or business goal for this year by the end of 2022?
Great question. So I guess two parts. So the process, I'll maybe go through that part first. So, I really like the human connection. So I know a lot of mortgage stuff gets done online, like people shop and they see all these rates online. But for me, it's all about the connection. So I refer to those as transactional relationships, but I'm more of a relational person. I want to build that relationship with a client rather than taking the transactional approach. Like, yeah, here's your mortgage. You don't know who I am. I'm never going to see you again. Never hear from you. Sign here. Boom, done. See you later. On to the next. I don't work like that. For me, it's all about building the relationship, and that's where you get those reviews from, right? From clients that you've helped, you've serviced, you've provided a value and a service to them, and that's what they appreciate. And those are the ones who are going to be the proponents of your business and really spread the word. Like, word of mouth referral is the best referral that you can get because they've already worked with you and they're telling their friends or family about you. And that's really why I really emphasize or focus on the relational approach. So my process is, before COVID, I was trying to meet as many of my clients in person as possible. And I know there's a lot of brokers like, they kind of brag about like, oh, it's great, I never have to meet any of my clients. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but how about, like, I'm the other way. I'm like, I want to meet all my clients in person to kind of establish that one-on-one connection with them, right? Obviously during COVID, like, everything has been, through Zoom and through phone, and now hopefully transitioning back to in person a little bit. But when I meet my clients, I'm kind of doing a pre-approval while I'm speaking with them. So I know obviously what questions to ask, and I let them speak, like, hey, share what you want to share. I'm like, hey, thank you so much for sharing that information. I'm going to have a few questions to fill in some holes. And then I'm kind of just building that pre-approval in my mind. I'm already kind of identifying, okay, where is this going to be a fit? Where is it not going to be a fit? Like, what are their goals? What are they trying to achieve here? And then we come up with a solution and a number of options for them. So on a phone call or on a Zoom call, I've got a calculator that I can kind of ask these questions, and as they're speaking, I would kind of punch in this information in my calculator. And on that phone call, I can give them a very rough idea of how much they will be able to borrow. Of course, it's not going to be formal because, especially with self-employed people, they're like, oh, I make $100,000. I'm like, okay, great. So I'm punching in 100,000, and this is, how much you qualify for. And then when we see their documents, they're like, oh, it was 93. I read it up. Or, my gross income was 100, but I wrote down 50,000 of expenses. So now it's only 50. So again, I say this is a very informal, rough idea of what you qualify for. To formalize it, we need to get those documents. So that's step 2 of the process. So step 1 is the discovery call, or the discovery meeting, where I kind of gather that information. Step 2 would be to basically validate all that information. So we would get all their documents, have my underwriter review it all. If there's any concerns, we would address those in advance so that when they do make an offer, we're not kind of wondering what's going on or chasing anything. So we have all that taken care of before. And then step 3 is what I call the strategy call. So I don't like to kind of overwhelm clients with one call of like, hey, this is everything you need to know about mortgages in one 30-minute call. It's just too much information. It's very overwhelming for people who don't understand finance or mortgages. So again, 3-step process. Step 1 is the discovery session where I gather information. Step 2 is we validate all that information and give them a pre-approval based on, fact and seeing the documents. And then step 3, I would have what we call the strategy session. So I'd like, okay, now let's talk about the difference between a fixed rate and a variable rate, the different amortizations, different product offerings, the fine nuances between different lenders, and let's make an informed decision. And so now we know that when they make an offer and that offer is hopefully accepted, we already know how we're going to go with it and where we're going to go, so that when we get those documents from the realtor, we're ready to go. There's no like, oh, now let's set up a call and figure out what we want to do, because we're cutting into time if we have the luxury of having subjects, which we're seeing a little bit more of now. But we want to move quick, and so we already have the plan in place before the offer is being made.
Zaheed, we have so for our listeners who are mortgage brokers and realtors alike, this question comes from like someone cold calling and you don't know this lead at all. They're coming from online. And, I think online shoppers, home buyers are very resourceful. So they're putting in the same question on 3 different websites, just like when they're trying to find an evaluation for their home, they're asking, how much is my property worth? And we don't know this lead. So I'm assuming you also get those type of inquiries where how much, what kind of rate can you give me? So what advice do you have for our listeners to get to that next step of getting them to commit to you?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we get I get calls and what's your best rate? Like literally that's their question. Like, oh, hi, I found you online.
It's
What's
like
your
for
best
us,
rate?
it's what's your commission?
Yeah, what's your commission?
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go, right? We all get it, right? So how do we shift the conversation from that to showing why you should work with me as opposed to that other person? What's your value add? So how do you set yourself apart? So, I'll say, okay, well, you found me online, so you've seen what 400 plus other people have said about working with me. So again, the focus isn't about the rate, but it's really about finding the right solution or the right product for you based on your needs. There's no one rate for every person. And other mortgage brokers will know this, that, it really depends on, is it an insured mortgage? Do they have less than 20% down, or is it going to be uninsured? Is there more than 20%? The rates are different. Do they want a fixed? Do they want a variable? Do they want a 5-year, 3-year, 2-year, 1-year? There's what's the amortization? So there's not one rate for everyone. So I will actually turn it around on the client, be like, okay, well, is it insured or uninsured? Well, what does that mean? And so I get them to ask questions that they don't know answers to, right? And then now you're showing their value, because I'm like, hey, what's the amortization? And they're like, I think 25. I'm like, okay, do you know if you qualify for a 25-year? I should. I'm like, okay. And then is it, so you really want to kind of position back to them, to have them ask questions, or ask them questions that they may not, likely won't know the answers to. And then you kind of engage, now the conversation is going and you're kind of showing your value. And now you can say, okay, well, I know you saw that rate online, but that is for someone who's purchasing with 5% down on a property that's, $500,000. Is that you? And they're like, well, no, I'm looking for this. So, okay, well, that rate unfortunately won't apply to you. So it's really about shifting the conversation, or kind of developing that conversation, and then shifting the focus away from rate, but more opposed to more into what the value is that you provide.
I love that. So what I'm hearing is being more curious about, and being educating them in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Education is key, because oftentimes I'll get a client oh, my friend said this and my friend said that. I'm okay, great. No, I'm sure your friends are great people. But maybe your friend has, obtained one more, okay, even 2 more, maybe 3 mortgages in their life.
And that advice is normally for themselves, for that friend that will work for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just had this call half an hour ago with the client. It's but my friend got this, and my friend, okay, but do you know your friend's credit score? Do you know your friend's income? Do you know that the property, if your friend, we have a client right now, there's an issue with the building, and I'm like, okay, but did the client, your friend, have, the building they bought where it was a clean strata, right? So again, every case or every file is different, and every situation is different. So I always get that, my friend this, I'm like, hey, I'm sure your friends are great people, and no disrespect to them, but they may have done 1, 2, okay, even 3. I'll even give them 5 mortgages in their life if they've been investors or whatever. I've done it a few more times over 10 years. So, I'd hope that you trust an expert as opposed to your friend who works in healthcare.
And bet you the 5 mortgages are all different, even though it's one borrower. So in general, right now, there's a lot of self-employed people who are looking for mortgages.
Like realtors.
Like realtors, like ourselves. Yeah. So, most of our listeners are realtors. How do we qualify? How do we make ourselves qualifiable and a good candidate to borrow money?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've helped a number of realtors qualify for mortgages. So with self-employed, there's a couple different ways to do it. So generally speaking, if we're looking to go with traditional, Big 5, Big 6 bank financing, most of them are going to require a 2-year average of your personal net income. Okay, so obviously we have expenses, so we'll have that gross number be very attractive, especially in our market, right? We all are quite busy and doing well, but we also have a lot of expenses. So generally speaking, we'll be looking at 2 years of the net income after expenses on your personal tax returns. However, some lenders will look at PREC income. So obviously, I'm not sure if you're both PREC or not, but if you are a PREC, some lenders will look at, and this applies to just self-employed in general, if you are incorporated and you are the sole owner of that incorporation, then you can look at a percentage of your net corporate income. So we'd look at your net income minus the taxes that you paid, minus any dividends that you've taken out, and maybe use, like up to 60% of that income and help you qualify. So you can use your personal net income plus a portion of your PREC or corporate income if you're doing something else, and then we would use that for your income. Now, if that doesn't get you to where you want to get, we do have alternative options as well. So you've heard the term B lenders, I'm sure. We have the big banks, we have the monoline lenders or the non-bank lenders, which I'll commonly refer them to in our conversations with clients. So those are all on the A side. Those are regular income qualified, we can qualify with traditional income methods. B lenders are for borrowers who may not be able to provide the right income documentation for the A side, or maybe there's some credit challenges. So those are where we can use the B lenders. So B lenders are a little bit more lenient in terms of how much they would lend. So they may lend you more than an A lender will, and they also maybe use a different way of calculating your income. So for self-employed, one of the great niches that the B lenders have is they will look at 6 months of your bank statements. Okay, so they'll look at all the deposits over 6 months. So let's just throw out a number. You've made $100,000. You've had a great year, and I made $100,000 over 6 months. And they will subtract reasonable expenses for what you do. So a car. You've got your even your internet connection, phone bill. Like those are, you have to have some expenses. So they'll, even the minor ones, right? They'll just take that off. And so say you've got $80,000 of net income over that 6 months. Look at the bank statements. You don't need to show your tax returns or anything. And they will take that 80, multiply it by 2, and your income is going to be assumed at $160,000 per year. So they'll just look at 6 months bank statements, deposits, expenses, figure out what you've kind of made net over those 6 months, and multiply it by 2 and use that income. And again, they won't ask to see your tax returns, personal or corporate. You do have to kind of sign off in saying that you don't owe any taxes to the government, but that's a program that we've helped a lot of self-employed people with. With that program, there's 3 things. So the B lenders rates are going to be slightly higher, like a touch higher than what a bank rate is. They only offer fixed rate mortgages, and you can only get a mortgage for 1 or 2 years with them. So it's a bit of a stopgap. They kind of position themselves like, okay, let's get this mortgage, get you 1 or 2 years in so that you can get your taxes in order to move it over to a bank after you get your 2 years of income. But a lot of self-employed people say, wait a second, so I'd have to pay all this tax on my income if I reported it fully and get my mortgage to the bank, or I can pay a little bit more on my interest rate and just get it with an alternative lender. The kicker is there's a fee. So there's a 1% fee that you do have to pay of the mortgage amount. So if you're going to buy an investment property for $1 million, put 20% down, $800,000 mortgage, there would be an $8,000 fee one time. And people don't like paying that fee. So my way around that is like, okay, so let me see. You bought this for $1 million. If it was $1,008,000, would you still have bought it?
That's a good question. It turns it around.
Exactly, right? They're like, oh, an $8,000 fee. I'm like, hey, wait, that property was listed at $950,000.
Yeah.
You've offered $1 million, so you're paying $50,000 more for your property. But when it comes to paying $8,000 more for the mortgage, you're kind of like, not sure about it. Like, I don't know. Like, if it was $1,008,000, I'm sure you still would have bought it.
I scratch my head sometimes when they would have purchased like $1 million property and they're like asking for something really tiny to be included in the home. And I'm like, you just spent $1 million. You can't spend $20 on adding an additional light switch. Exactly.
It's a mindset thing. Well, Zaheed, we get this question a lot from our clients, and I'm sure you get it all the time. So not just about the actual rate of a mortgage, but the question is, should I go fixed or variable? And we know that it really depends on people's personal and individual scenario. But how do you often answer that with clients that are asking you fixed or variable? Which one's better?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and it is very much case by case. It's going to depend on the client's risk profile, their risk tolerance levels, obviously. And I say, like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's what lets you sleep at night, right? So some people just like the stability and security of knowing, like, okay, for the next up to 5 years or whatever the term is, my payment is going to stay the same. I know what it is. I don't have to worry about what's going on in the world. I know what my payment is for 5 years, and I'm okay with that. I just had this conversation with someone, like, there's a big gap right now between fixed and variable. So if a fixed rate mortgage payment is going to be, a few $100s higher than a variable rate payment, and this client is like, that's okay. I just want peace of mind, and I'm willing to pay a couple $100s a month for that peace of mind. And I was like, okay, I can't argue that. Like, that's your risk level, and that's what you want to do. I'm giving you the information to make the most informed decision. And if that's what you want to do, then you're the client. Like, I'm going to do what you say, right? But on the other side is, I'll very in detail explain the differences between the two and the risks of both, right? Like, so right now, a lot of the conversations that I'm having with the variable rate side is, as we know, like, the Bank of Canada is on a path to increase rates. So we have to look at that gap, right? So if there's a, let's call it 1.25, 1.4% gap between a fixed rate and a variable rate today, if someone were to take a variable, yes, I'm like, look, it is going to go up, and you're going to get an email from me on June 1st when the rates go up. How are you going to feel when you get that email? Are you going to be like, oh my gosh, I should have gone with the fixed? Or are you going to be like, it's okay, I understand, I'll ride the roller coaster? So I always position it that way, like, how are you going to feel then, not today? Because when you get that email from me that, hey, rates have gone up, your payment has gone up, are you going to be okay with that? And if you are going to be okay with that, and you understand that there is a big gap, and you're comfortable with that, and you can stomach that, then variable could be an option.
Let me ask the same question a different way. If the question was Zaheed, you as Zaheed, you're answering as yourself, and you're going to buy something, are you going to go fixed or variable today, given your personal scenario?
I'm going variable. I've always gone variable, and I always will go variable. Yeah. As one of the yeah, there's someone in the industry who's got a very good reputation, and I think he's quoted this as like, that life is variable, and so your mortgage should be variable too.
That's clever.
The golden child, golden referral. What are the 3 top tips if we were to give you a referral? What ideally should they have ready for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to actually make it 4.
Okay.
4
Okay.
Things. So
Good.
the 4 things that are most important to qualifying for a mortgage, and if we can vet these as a realtor, in a loose conversation, is income. So have your income ready to go, documentation ready to go, especially if you're self-employed, have your taxes ready to go. Number 2 is, debt is obviously key, and having minimal debt will be helpful in getting a mortgage approved at a higher amount. Keeping your credit clean is very important. Banks want to see, like, your credit worthiness, right? Like, have you paid your bills on time? Have you had any issues in the past? Collections, bankruptcy, consumer proposal. And number 4 is down payment. So the biggest one is down payment. We get calls a lot where clients are, I make this much money, I have this and that, and then I'm like, hey, how much do you have for down payment? And they're like, $25,000. And I'm like, okay, but they're trying to buy like $1 million home. Like, hey, well, that's not going to be enough of a down payment to purchase, what you're looking to get. And they get really discouraged around the down payment. So then, we'll talk about, like, where can down payment come from, right? So down payment can come from your own savings. It can come from TFSA. A portion can come from an RSP as a first-time home buyer. It can be liquidating investments. Gift from mom and dad, or bank of mom and dad, as we call it. If that's an option, is something where a gift can come from. In certain cases, down payment can be borrowed funds as well through a line of credit. In very select few cases, though. But down payment, income, debt, and credit, those are the main 4 things that if we can have those bundled up into one, that would be great.
That's his ideal.
And then you can get it done less than 24 hours, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's done it.
That's the goal. Our goal is to get it, like we've had a number of deals where we've just gotten done in hours, not even like 20, like in the same day. And again, that's where it comes in, like, having the file packaged. You're doing the lender's job internally before they even get it. So if you have someone who underwrites for you, they pretty much, like, like my personal underwriter came from a financial institution, so she's already seen that side of it. So now she works for me, so she'll package it up, send it off, so that when they get it, they're like, wow, you like, this is great, like this is all like fully like set up for us to just approve, right? Like you've explained everything, you've packaged everything, you've labeled everything correctly, like you just know what you're doing, and it's done. Like you've done their job for them. And I really found that, when I was trying to scale my business is, how can we get deals done quicker? And so I actually reached out to all the different, we deal with a lot of different lenders. There's a handful that we deal with on a regular basis. And I actually reached out to all of them, the underwriters directly, and said, okay, what can we do to make your job easier for you so that we can get quicker turnovers? Like, how do you like your deal packaged? And everyone kind of has their own preference. Like, okay, I want everything in like one email, like separated this way. I want one. Another one's like, oh, I'd prefer it this way. So we kind of know what every lender prefers. And based on that, we would then send the file accordingly. So when they get it, they're like, oh, this is great. Like it's ZAHEED's file. It's super clean. Like we can maybe bump this up list because we know it's going to be an easy one to approve.
That's something that's so simple, but I haven't heard of anybody else doing that. Going to the lenders directly and asking. That's brilliant.
It's something I did with not even just lenders, but I also did it with notaries too. Like when I talk to my clients, like I prep them for the notary, but I want to make sure that I'm prepping them correctly. So I'm talking to them like, hey, and I think the three of us have bought and sold properties through our careers as well. So we've been there and we've sat on that desk. So we kind of have an idea of what we go through. So again, part of the value add or the service that offers, like, and a lot of notaries that I work with, they're like, man, your clients are great. They're so prepped. Like there's so much stuff I don't have to explain, or like they've already kind of got an idea from me. So in our closing meeting, when we sign everything, I kind of give them an idea of like, this is what you're going to expect of a notary. So I reached out to notaries when I first started. I'm like, hey, what can I do to make it easier for you to do your job? And so I kind of reached out to the whole, like the sphere of everyone who's kind of got a hand on the process, from, realtors, appraisers, notaries, lenders, and kind of like, talk to me about your role in this whole process or journey for the client, and let me understand it so that when I talk to my clients, I can prep them for what to expect and how it's going to look. So when I sit down with my clients, I kind of put I'm not a notary, full disclaimer, but I'll put on that hat and be like, okay, so you're going to bring in the remainder of the down payment. You're going to bring in the property transfer tax. You're going to bring in their fees. Depending if you're moving in the middle of the month, there might be some strata fee adjustments. There could be property tax adjustments. If you're, you could receive a credit for property taxes depending on the time of year. So I kind of prep them, and they're like, okay, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, the notary's going to reach out to you. They're going to let you know how much you need to bring in. You're going to bring in a draft. You're going to go there. You're going to sign the most times you ever signed anything in your life, and that's how it's going to go, right? So I really took the time to kind of talk to all the people involved in the home buying journey to understand what they do, how they do it, and how, as a broker, we can help them, or even just provide that, that guideline for a client of what to expect.
And what makes a great experience out of that.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Curious what your thoughts are on this. It speaks a little bit to where the trend is going with mortgages at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of talk of the rate hikes by the end of the year and going into next year as well. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Since we're headed away from a seller's market into more of a little bit of a balanced market, do you think, in your opinion, it would be better to wait to purchase a home, okay, at a discounted price if you're anticipating maybe a price slide? However, at the lower interest rate, because the rates that people are locked in for right now, they're quite low. So let's say it's 3.4 or whatever. Would your advice be for someone to do that, or wait a little bit longer, purchase a home at a lesser rate, but at that point the rates could be significantly higher? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we're kind of in that juncture right now, right, where there are still some really good rate holds out there. The bulk of them, I feel, I think it's mid-June is kind of when the bulk of them kind of expire. So we are seeing a bit of a rush with a lot of our clients to try and find something. We had some super quick closes in the middle of May for some sub 3% interest rates that just matured. So the kind of the low 3, mid 3, they're coming up in June. So I think we're going to see a bit of a rush there where people are going to try and take advantage of those low fixed mortgage rates that they have held. world. But to answer your question, it's really going to, and that's one of the things like I'll do is I'll talk to my clients about like the numbers behind it. Like, let's analyze this, right? So if we're going to see this percentage drop, let's compare that to what the mortgage payment would be and then see what makes sense. So it's going to be case by case for most people. But I think here, like, there's a lot of people that are waiting on the sidelines that can afford a slightly higher mortgage payment, and they are waiting for those prices to come down. So I think we're going to see a lot of activity if we do see prices come off, and obviously we've seen a shift in the market the last couple of weeks, that we are going to see people who are going to be taking maybe variable rate mortgages and getting these places at a bit of a discount from what we've seen in the last few months. So yeah, I would feel that if people are going to wait, there are going to still be a lot of buyers that are going to take advantage of those lower prices and go with variable rate mortgages.
There's new buyers coming in all the time too, right? So
yeah, have you seen a shift in the first quarter to the first month of the second quarter yet?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think for me, like, I really noticed it in the last 2 weeks, and in our volumes, but also in what we see coming in on approved, like, seeing offers with subjects, you're like, wow, this is great. Like,
you're like,
we
what
don't
is
see this often. What is this? Like, this is like a luxury, right? Like, wait, I don't have to get this approved like in 4 hours or like in the same day. Like, I have time. So, so it's been nice to see that. And obviously, this is probably another podcast in itself, but that cooling off period that'll come in, and I know we all have our different opinions on that, but we'll save that for another episode maybe that you might get into.
Don't get her started on it.
Yeah, I know. We've kind of had an off the record conversation a little while back about it, and I know her sentiment on that. But again, we'll go get away from that one.
We'll save it for another day. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we'll need some time for that one. But I have seen the shift in the last couple of weeks. So yes, we are seeing things kind of cool off. We're not seeing as many multiple offer situations. And again, it is different for different areas of the city and different properties. I've seen a lot of reductions in prices. And I don't know if you guys are having these conversations with your clients where maybe the property's been sitting for a few weeks or a month and you're like, hey, well, I think, we might need to make a price adjustment here, right? So I've seen, a lot of sellers kind of say, well, my neighbor sold for that much, or I saw this one, so this is how much we want, and this is what we're going to list for. And, I know obviously prior to that, everyone was listing low and trying to attract the multiple offers and seeing what it ends up going for. But now I feel that we're seeing people kind of like, no, we're just going to start here because this is what that person got and try and get more. But we're not going to see that now. I feel that more part is kind of disappearing, has been in the last couple of weeks. So I think we're going to see some price reductions and maybe see if they get multiple offers on that.
Yeah, I think, but in your role specifically, so we are definitely seeing less multiple offers. We're definitely seeing some price adjustments in subjects. But do you think your volume will be the same at the end of Q2? Because, this is a great time for buyers to get in and take advantage of this, that they can actually buy a property without having to pay over asking and guessing a number.
Yeah.
So I feel like even though you're seeing this shift in the mindset of buying, like I feel like there's going to be still a good heavy volume for Q2.
There is, yeah, for sure. And we've seen it, like our volume is pretty healthy for Q2. We have to keep in mind here, we're in this later spring market, right? Like traditionally, the Vancouver spring market, and again with COVID, we've kind of lost those boundaries of time, and we're like, why was January so slow? I'm like, well, hey, go back for the last 10 years, January's never busy, right? Or December is never busy. So we were just, again with COVID, we just kind of, those boundaries of time were eliminated, right? So we're just like, oh my gosh, like December, January, like why wasn't it busy? I'm like, well, it's supposed to be busy, but now we're in the spring market. So, I think the volumes that we're seeing, yeah, definitely we're seeing it, it's continuing on. And the other thing for us is a little bit different is that not only do you handle purchases, but we also handle refinances and renewals too. So our volumes are going to be a bit skewed. Like I haven't broken it down to like what percentage of that was purchase versus renewal versus refinance, but we do have kind of three opportunities to help clients with purchase, renewal, and refinance.
Good point. So the question that always gets asked at the very end when you're signing your mortgage documents is whether or not to purchase insurance. And I often click click no, like I don't want to buy insurance. What do you like? I know everybody's different because it depends on maybe their health conditions or their type of employment. So where's the decision? Like what factors does someone need to consider?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, as mortgage brokers, with every file that we help with, we do have to offer the Manulife product. And so there's a life component to it, and there's also a disability component to it. So I'll fully say, look, I'm not a licensed life insurance individual by any means. It's something that we do offer. I know the product reasonably well, so I will explain this product to them. And I'll also introduce them to someone else who's more qualified to answer more specific or detailed questions and maybe offer them a more comprehensive package if that's of interest to them. But one of the things that I will mention on the disability piece is I ask them, like, hey, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? Do you go do double black diamonds every weekend in the winter where you could break a leg? Do you mountain bike every weekend? Like, do you work in in construction, or do you work in a meat processing facility or something where there's a risk of injury, right? So a lot of the times clients will kind of take that into consideration on the disability piece. But with the life piece, I always suggest, let me create an introduction to someone who can, answer more questions in detail, like specific to your case. Like, I don't really want to, I'm helping them with their mortgage. I'm not going to kind of get to their personal, medical questionnaire, right? Or their health conditions, pre-existing health conditions. I feel it's like a little bit out of my scope. So I kind of say, hey, let me put you in touch with someone. If you're planning on having a family, or there's going to be some significant change in your life, like, the sooner you get in, the lower the premiums are. So, I'll kind of chime in with what I feel is valuable information, but then I'll also, make sure they get in touch with someone who's more qualified to answer those detailed questions.
Awesome. And I've always been really interested in private lending, like me being as a lender. So, and that's as a passive income. So can you tell us a little bit about someone like myself who's interested in investing in that?
Yeah, for sure. I do a little bit of that myself, and I've helped clients with that. A lot of individuals won't qualify through an A lender, the big banks or the non-bank lenders that we have access to. They not qualify through B lenders. They may be in a situation where they really need to take out equity from their home, and those files do come across my desk, and if it's something that I'm not interested in, or I have kind of a roster of people that I know that are looking to lend out their funds as well, so maybe position them. But we also have access to, and you're maybe familiar with the term MICs, so mortgage investment corporations. So in Vancouver there are many MICs in the city that are open to doing these types of deals. A lot of them happen on the construction side as well. A lot of construction projects will go through private lending or MICs. But for yourself, or anyone who's listening who's looking to get in that space, you as an individual are able to invest in a MIC, and then that MIC would then lend out your money. So a MIC is essentially a pool of funds. So if there's 10 people in a room and we had $1 million each to put in, the MIC or the pool would have $10 million to lend out on a mortgage. Someone would go to the MIC and say, hey, I need $500,000 for this mortgage. Okay, well, now the MIC has $9.5 million left in the pool. So that's the MIC. So you as an individual can invest in the MIC, and they kind of talk about what their returns are year over year over the past, however long they've been in. So that's a great opportunity to have your investment continuously invested, because you're always getting that return. So you put in your money, you're getting a return on that 365 days a year. Whereas if you do it individually, you may lend someone money for a year. So now you've invested in this particular mortgage for this particular one individual for a year, and then they pay you out in a year, hopefully. But then what? Your money's back in your hand, not earning any interest or anything. So you'd have to find another deal. But what if there's a gap of 6 months before there's another opportunity? So with a MIC, you're continuously earning that return. Whereas if you're doing it individually, you may make a little bit more on the deal, but you may not have that invested 365 days a year.
We're going to shift the conversation a little bit about you and your offerings on whatever you want to talk about, really. But I guess we could start the question with, what do you see? What is your team's competitive advantage? Why should people work with you?
That's a great question. And it's a bit of it's a very bold acronym. And again, the acronym was formed after I came up with the 5 points that form the acronym. Like I kind of like the 5 keys to success, right? And I was like trying to find a word that I could like, make an acronym. It's a bold one. So I'm going to put it out there. The acronym is POWER. Okay. And so it's professional, organized, and then W for work ethic, and then E for efficient, and then R is kind of, it actually turned into 3 R's, so it's responsive, reliable, and relational. And if you're consistent in all those 7 things, those are the keys to success. And if I wanted to really minimize that, it's really about the service that we offer and the work ethic. In our respective industries, what sets you apart from the next realtor or the next mortgage broker is the service that you provide. You have access to the same on resale. You have access to the same, both of you sitting side by side have access to the exact same listings on resale. Pre-sale is a little bit different. We have, status and VIP and access and all of it on resale. You have the same access to the same listings for your buyers. So what sets the two of you apart is the service, right? And the work ethic. So for me, it's really about being responsive, which, unfortunately, I've heard that a lot of people aren't as responsive, and that's where maybe they lose opportunities, right? So being responsive, being reliable, being relational, and, just providing great service, being professional. And then on the back end, it's the systems and processes, being organized, being efficient with your time. So if you want to be responsive and you want to be reliable and you want to provide quick service, you have to have the systems and processes to be able to do that on the back end. And if you can kind of couple that all or put that all together, those are your keys to success.
I don't know if you have a training manual or anything, but I kind of find that word and your explanation of it can be like a handbook for many brokerages to use. So just another idea for you.
Yeah.
I know you're an entrepreneur, so it'll be really handful. How do you?
I'll recommend a good book, actually. Sorry,
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
As a tangent off that. So Atomic Habits by James
Yes.
Clear.
Oh, yeah.
I've read that.
I have that one. I haven't listened to it yet on Audible.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually listening to it for the second time right now, and there's so much that I took from it, and you can just apply it to so many things in your life, like personal, relationship, work, family, however you want to apply it. You can really, and I think Jenny, you've listened to it, right?
I have. Yeah, it was part of one of the books in my book club.
Yeah, so there's just so many takeaways from it, and I'll put it out there. I've never been a fan of reading. Like I don't think haven't read a book since I was in university, to be honest with you. But this was an easy listen. I didn't read it. I listened to it on Audible, but it was and it's on Spotify as well. It was an easy listen, and it really there's a lot of like little nuggets of information that you can take from it and apply to your business, right? And so some of the things that I touched on actually were kind of tied in with what the habits that you form. And so if you can kind of find your key to success and be consistent in it, that's where I think a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and it's a great idea. And I don't know what episode is this. Sorry, I'm going to just go off topic here. What
85?
We're in the 80s. So that's consistency, right? Yeah. So that's consistency, right? Because like so many people like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast, and they do like 1, 2, 3, and then what happened to your podcast? Oh, it's just, I don't know, it's too much work or too much time. But it's really about, finding your keys to success or your habits and being consistent with them. And so when I kind of identified those 5, 6 things or 7 things, I just really focus on being consistent with each of those things.
Mm-hmm. We had an inspector also have a couple of weeks ago on, and I think he had like over 450 Google reviews.
Yeah.
You have a lot of Google reviews, and there's often we're done the sale, but we're really afraid to ask for that review. We're super shy about it. We're an imposter, and so how do you ask for reviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in real estate and mortgage, there's a bit of a different a timeline journey. So our part ends kind of, before when we sign off on the mortgage documents, then it goes to the notary, and then they meet you to get keys, right? So for me, when I sign with my clients at the end, I always say, it was such a pleasure to work with you. I hope you're really happy with the service. And they say, yeah, it was great. And, and I'm like, yeah, and I thank so-and-so for referring and this and that. And I said, if you could just take 1 minute of your time, this would mean a lot to me. I'd really appreciate it. And it's a simple ask. And they're like, and I send them the link right away. And that's what I do. Like, I just really just genuinely ask. I say, I hope you're happy with the service. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For realtors, a suggestion for all the realtors listening out there. So the day they get their keys, leaving a review is not going to be the top thing on their mind. So I always suggest to a lot of the realtors out there is that wait, I don't know, 2 weeks, a month, like maybe you do a check-in. I don't know what your processes are, but maybe do a check-in, like, hey, hope the move went well, or hope everything's coming together. Like, maybe give it a couple weeks, right? And say, hopefully you're all settled in. If you take a moment, I'm really trying to build my online profile, and Google reviews are a big part of that. Would you mind filling out a review for me, or a testimonial, something short and sweet? I'd really appreciate it. So just maybe give it some time. Or again, some realtors I know do like a gift drop off or a gift delivery, and I've been told that some of them do it on possession day. But if you actually waited 3 weeks or a month for that gift, so now they've kind of moved in, they're in, like, hey, it was great working with you, and I hope you're settled in. I have a small gift that I want to come drop off to you. When can I do that? And then they say, oh, thank you so much, really appreciate it. Yeah, we're free on Saturday afternoon, like, stop by anytime. We'd love to show you how we set the place up. And I'm like, okay, great, I'll be there. See you then. In the meantime, if you have a moment, do you mind just leaving me a review? I'd really appreciate it. So now you're going to go there with a gift a month later, and you've just asked them for something small in return, right?
Yeah.
Good idea.
We have one final question for you before we do the last fun part, because we like to have fun on this podcast. Are there any special? Yeah, you did your homework.
I've listened to a couple of them. Yeah.
He was anticipating the animal question.
I know.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any special promotions happening right now in the mortgage market or equity takeout market? Anything that you want to say? Speak to any of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so some lenders are offering some cashback incentives right now for your business, and then there's also still some lenders that have promotions for frontline or healthcare workers, which I think we can all appreciate that they've done so much for us in the last couple of years, and I'm glad that lenders are acknowledging that as well, and there are some promotions in terms of rates and cashback available for them as well. So that's kind of what's out there right now in terms of offerings from lender side.
Mm-hmm. All right,
great.
We got the 5 rapid fire questions to wrap this up. All right, he's ready. The 3 words that best describes you.
I would say, I'm going to say stubborn, but in a good way and not a bad way. So always kind of fighting for that extra bit for my client, like going the extra mile, and I'm just not a quitter, so I won't give up. So I'll say stubborn in a very positive way, but ask my mom and she might have said it in the other way when I was growing up, but I'm a Taurus, so I think it just comes with the territory. So I'd say that, and then just overall, like, professional. I really pride myself in, I've been an entrepreneur in another business prior to this, so I learned a lot from that. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family as well, so just kind of, putting the clients first, and it's about them, it's not about us, right? It's about the client, and you're there to provide a value and service. So professional in that regard, and then I think you're responsive and reliable, like, combined. I think those two are really big things that kind of set me apart from from maybe some other people in the industry. Or
Absolutely.
Zaheed, if you were not a mortgage broker, what would you be?
Well, someone asked a couple weeks ago what my burning desire was, and that's kind of tied to this, would be, I would love to be on the Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, whichever one you watch. I don't know if you used to watch one or the other, but I would love to be on there as a shark or a dragon. I mean, I love hearing about people's stories and people's ideas. So I'd feel that I'd be some kind of an investor in entrepreneurial ideas.
Okay. What do you think is the key to living a good life?
Balance. I think I learned in the first part of my career that it can't be all work. You have to really balance your life out, and whatever that balance is for you is individual and case by case. But work, life, family, relationship, like whatever it is for you, there has to be balance. Because again, we can work. I could work 25 hours a day, but it's not possible. Physically it's not possible. You can't do it. So you have to really create balance and set boundaries as well. That's something I struggled with earlier. And so when I gave that, experience of being in the office at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night, like that shouldn't be the case, right? You shouldn't have worked, like a 12-hour day from 8 to 8 and still be in the office on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So you have to really set boundaries and understand that clients will understand too. So, if someone worked in 9 to 5, they're not doing work at 5:30. So, let's wait till tomorrow, right? So, again, setting boundaries is really key, but and that kind of ties into the balance piece. So, I would say that would be the big thing is balance.
Next question. What is the strangest thing that you've seen on a client's credit history report?
I'm just going to go segue on that, not on a report, but in a client meeting. I met a client for a coffee once, and it was a loud coffee shop. So, we sat down and she's telling me what she does, and I'm like, I couldn't hear what she said, so I'm like, can you repeat that? And I had to hear it like 3 times, and she's like, I'm an exotic dancer, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I was just like, I've never helped someone get a mortgage who's an exotic dancer, right? And again, no judging, but it was just kind of those things like that just caught me off guard in the initial in the initial meeting. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and I had no idea how it works in that business, right, in terms of how they're compensated, right, and stuff. So is that one that stood out to me was just like not knowing like how their business worked, but you kind of learn, right? But in credit reports, like some of the things that we see, it's a fine line, especially when you're working with a couple, because again, we can't assume that both parties know about the other significant other's situation, right? So, you have to be really careful. And I'll admit, like early on in my career, I kind of talked about something in a conversation with a couple, and they're like, oh, wait a second, like what's that? Yeah. And I was like, and that was a lesson learned like early in my career that I never, would repeat again, is like, you keep it separate, right? And there's been conversations where clients say, hey, like, this is between you and me, like my partner is not going to know about this. Like, I'm like, okay, like, and I learned that lesson very early on. So it's be very careful. If you see, like, when you're working with a couple, you have to really like, be careful about what you're discussing, and
That's
making
also
sure
kind
that
of
they're
sad
both
to me,
okay with
but
it. A little bit, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And again, but we don't judge how relationships work, and every couple's different and has their own kind of way of coexisting, right? So we don't, we can't assume that, right? But I can see where you're coming from on that for sure, yeah.
Yeah. What advice would you give your younger self in the first year of this business?
That's a good one. I would say set boundaries early and hold to them. Because when you're young, when you start out, you're just so like trying to get the next deal. You're really like trying to build and grow your business. But if you stick with it, it'll come. I say to like a lot of people in my industry when they're like, oh, it's been a bit slow and this and that. I'm like, okay, so if you weren't doing what you're doing, you'd maybe be working at a bank, or you'd be working something that's 9 to 5, right? So I'm like, tell me when the last time was that you worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday on your mortgage business. And a lot of them, they couldn't answer that. They couldn't say that they worked 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day or whatever for a week, as they would have if it was a full-time job. So a lot of people in our industry don't treat it like a full-time job. And that's fine. Like, there's people who are in our industries because they feel like they don't need to work a full-time job, and they can live life and enjoy and balance it out and stuff. But if the younger me, I'd definitely say set boundaries earlier and stick to them and just, know your worth, right?
All very good advice.
100%.
Final question. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously, if they look up ZAHEED Mortgage Broker, they'll come across, the reviews and all the different platforms and everything. But I go by VH Mortgage, which is the last initials of my last name. So VH Mortgage on Instagram and, all social media, you can find me there. So VH Mortgage, or just search ZAHEED Mortgage Broker in Google and it will all come up.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah,
We
was
really appreciate it.
very good session. Thank you so
It was
much.
such a pleasure. Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and it was something I was really looking forward to, and it was a great podcast, and congratulations to you on your consistency and success with this. I've listened to a few of them, and they've been great, and I applaud you for doing this and putting it together and providing valuable information to all your listeners. And I know I saw the different professions that you've had on here, and some really, really quality podcasts with some really good people that I know. I've seen some names in there as well. So congratulations on your success in the podcast and in your respective careers. I know you've both done very well. So, applause to you for.
Thanks, Zaheed.
Thank you, Zaheed.